The ends of the Earth, the two polar regions. The two polar regions are among the coldest places on the planet. A huge, frozen ocean, the Arctic, surrounds the North Pole, while a vast area of frozen land, Antarctica, surrounds the South Pole. Although they are at opposite ends of the planet, they have many things in common, such as long, dark winters and short, light summers. Antarctica is a vast, remote continent nearly entirely blanketed by ice, with very few plants able to survive. Powerful currents and fierce winds circle the surrounding oceans, forming a natural barrier that isolates Antarctica from the rest of the world and maintains its colder climate compared to the Arctic. The Arctic isn't as isolated as Antarctica since several northern continents stretch into the Arctic Circle. Most of the deep Arctic Ocean is covered by permanent pack ice, and the largest area of land ice is found in the Greenland ice sheet. How cold? Antarctica is much colder than the Arctic because it's a solid, deep frozen landmass, while the Arctic is mostly ocean that only freezes on the surface. A white world ice is the main feature of both the polar regions. During summer, tourist ships can reach the Antarctic Peninsula, as the sea ice breaks up into smaller pieces. But when winter hits, everything freezes back over again. The auroras, the northern and southern lights, also known as auroras, are beautiful, colorful lights that appear in the sky near the poles. They're created when charged particles from the sun collide with the gases in Earth's atmosphere, causing the gases to glow and create these amazing light displays. Midnight sun. In areas close to the poles, the sun never sets during summer and never rises during winter. This happens because of Earth's tilt. While one pole enjoys continuous daylight in the summer, the other stays in complete darkness. Adaptable animals. Polar animals that stay year-round have special ways of surviving the cold. Some mammals grow thick, white fur in the winter to blend in with the snow. Many mammals also have a layer of fat under their skin to keep warm and provide extra energy. Birds have dense, fluffy feathers that protect them from the cold. When summer comes, these animals shed their thick coats to stay comfortable. Bears. Polar bears live only in the Arctic. They travel long distances across the sea ice in search of seals. These bears are great swimmers and divers, and they often catch rides on floating ice chunks as they move across the sea. Penguins. Penguins are birds that can't fly, but they're amazing swimmers. They live only in the southern half of the Earth. Most penguins build their nests on land without snow during the summer when the seas are full of fish. But emperor penguins are different, they breed in the cold Antarctic winter. In early April, emperor penguins start a long journey of 100 kilometers south, walking in complete darkness to find their nesting spots on the ice. By early May, right before the cold winter begins, the female penguins lay their eggs and go back to the ocean. The male penguins stay behind and keep the eggs warm for 2 months during the freezing winter. When the females come back in July, they feed the baby penguins. Each year, emperor penguin pairs only have one baby, but sadly, only about 1 out of every 5 chicks make it. Animal visitors. The number and variety of animals living near the poles change dramatically with the seasons. Thousands of birds and mammals only visit the regions during the brief, light summer months, when it is relatively warm and food is plentiful. Here they can find safe places to rear their young, with few predators and little competition for food and nesting places. Long-haul. The Arctic tern breeds in large colonies during the Arctic summer. It then flies all the way to Antarctica to take advantage of the almost constant daylight and rich food supply of the Antarctic summer. Colossal iceberg. Snowfall on Antarctica turns into ice, which compacts and flows down toward the coastal ice shelves. Ocean currents and waves break up the ice shelves, creating icebergs. Some icebergs are up to 300 kilometers long and 40 kilometers wide. Large icebergs can be tracked by satellites for years before they melt. Life in the Arctic. many groups of indigenous peoples live in the Arctic. In the 21st century, life in Arctic settlements looks much like life in other parts of the world. Despite there being fewer resources. However, indigenous communities still gather to make political decisions, share resources, and preserve their cultural traditions. Polar research scientists from all over the world work in the Arctic and Antarctic to study the ice, oceans, air, and the animals and plants living in these cold places. They work alongside the indigenous peoples in the Arctic to understand how these frozen regions affect our planet and how climate change is changing them. Arctic Station researchers there are part of a long-term study to see how climate change is affecting the Arctic environment. They gather information about the animals, plants, and the land itself to learn more about the region. Life at a polar research station is tough. All the researchers get special training to stay safe and handle the freezing temperatures and long, dark winters. But when they're not working, they make the most of their time in the polar regions, finding fun ways to pass the time like putting on musical theater shows, or even jumping into icy water. Dog sleds. Dog sleds aren't used in Antarctica, but they're still a common way to travel in the Arctic. European explorers learned how to use dog sleds from the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, for whom this is a traditional skill. Studying oceans. The polar oceans are very important for the global climate. Researchers use icebreaker ships to gather data and understand how these oceans are changing as the Earth warms. Polar climate. The climate in the polar regions has always been changing. Millions of years ago, there was no ice at the poles, but about 20,000 years ago, Earth was in the middle of an ice age. Today, we're experiencing a time of rapid warming, which could lead to dramatic changes in both the polar regions and the rest of the world. Shrinking sea ice. As global temperatures rise, the sea ice in the polar regions is melting. Arctic sea ice has been shrinking for decades, but until recently, the sea ice around Antarctica was actually growing. However, in 2016, scientists noticed that Antarctic sea ice started shrinking each year. The melting ice sheets are sending huge amounts of water into the warming oceans, which is causing sea levels to rise. This is a big problem for people who live on low-lying islands like the Maldives, which are at risk of flooding. While no one knows exactly when or how the ice sheets will melt, if they collapse suddenly, much more ice could slip into the sea, threatening coastal cities. Human impact. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic have lived in harmony with the environment for thousands of years, hunting and fishing while maintaining a balance with nature. However, many countries are now exploiting the polar regions for natural resources. Climate change, caused by human activities, is melting polar ice and making the oceans more acidic, which has devastating effects. As carbon dioxide levels rise in the atmosphere, much of it is absorbed by the oceans, making the water more acidic. This makes it harder for corals and shelled animals to build their external skeletons. Deep-sea corals in the polar regions are especially affected by the acidification of ocean water. I hope you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. See you next time. Bye.